Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, Deku, Reborn Gamer, by KingofStrayed. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin Chapter 1. Aldera High School. Izuku kept his head down as he played on his handheld. It was the latest and greatest in technology, able to run the same as the best computer with half the power and all the smoothness you could longing, just a marketed. The game he was playing. All Might's Villain Smackdown, Anniversary Edition. Multiple levels showcasing all of the villains he had ever fought, even the ones he had taken care of overseas during the villain outbreak if he was on the last level, and just about to deliver the final blow on a boss that had been giving him trouble for the last few hours. A giant villain, one that had towered over the Swiss country for a short PRD of time, yet still caused millions in damages, Alman Shaka. He finally had enough energy saved up for an ultimate, All Might's famous United States of Smash. He was about to deliver the final blow as the All Might character powered the attack up when he felt the familiar heat of an explosion on his back. Ugh! Izuku yelped as he was launched out of his chair, and fell to the ground. You still playing this junk, nerd? Bakugo asked as he picked up the handheld. You know this CRP won't make you an actual hero, right? If you keep filling your head with this SHT, it'll only get you killed. He taunted before blowing up the device in his hands, and threw it out the window. Stop buying this SHT, you're only draining your mother's pockets. She doesn't need more of a burden. Yeah, having a quirkless kid is enough of an annoyance, one of Bakugo's lackeys chimed in, stepping on Izuku's hand for a moment to get to Bakugo. I could only imagine having such a disappointing and useless kid. Seriously, another said, chuckling, I can't believe she didn't disown you but the moment she knew you were quirkless. Any sane person would've. Bakugo then let out a sigh as he headed for the doors of the classroom, his lackeys following close behind. You know, he said, if you really wanted to become a hero there's a surefire way, he joked, believe you'll be born with one in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof. His words were cold and unforgiving, but Izuku had grown used to them. The teen had chastised him every day, so it was nothing different from any other day. As the door closed, Izuku just let out a breath, trying to clam himself as he held in his tears, holding himself, as he tried hiding away from the world. Izuku looked at his handheld as if sat at the bottom of the fountain. Though, unsurprisingly, the device was fine, he'd have to thank his mother for letting him get the damage and waterproof version of the device. Despite the astronomical cost. He then pulled it out the fountain and shook the water off before turning the device on, seeing that the sudden attack from Bakugo had caused his ULT to miss, basically erasing the last 6 hours of hard work. He stayed up to beat that boss too. Izuku just let out a sigh before he began playing a different game, feeling too tired and defeated to try beating the final boss again. He was now playing Vigilante Havoc, a story of a vigilante going out to avenge the murder of his parents as a night hero. Elsewhere, a slime villain rushes his way through the streets, crashing and shoving his way through civilians as he carried a duffel bag of stolen money in his body. SHT, 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 he yelled, why the F is that smiley face BSTRD here, he cried, nearly getting blown away from another one of the Bright Heroes air attacks. Get back here, evildoer, the colossal blonde yelled. Think, come on. The slime villain panicked, darting his eyes around before he found a nearby dumpster, beside a small drain. Perfect. I'll ditch the cash and hide in the sewers, he thought before enacting his plan. Swiftly hiding the trove in the trash, manipulating his body over it before diving into the manhole cover. Sadly, All Might had only just arrived, seeing the slimy perp take refuge in the city's waterways. Ugh, my day just got much more difficult, he sighed before continuing the search into the smell sewage tunnels. Izuku let out a small sigh as he read through the dialogue of Vigilante Havoc. It was a pretty good game and all that, but it was lacking in a few areas. The fighting seemed a little rushed and the characters' abilities needed to be polished some. A shadow quirk was good, but they only let him use it for hiding, even though it seemed like he could also use it as a weapon from how it acted. He then let out another sigh, deciding to ignore the small flaws and continue playing. At least the story was pretty good, he thought, walking under the dark underpass that strangely resembled the one in the game. He let out a small chuckle at the fact before he heard a small clattering behind him, a medium-sized invisibility cloak, Izuku heard, prompting him to turn around and see a slimy villain towering over him, oh sure dash. He started, trying to run away from the criminal only for them to pounce on him. Ha ha ah ah ha. The villain laughed as it began filling Izuku's body with slime. You're a real lifesaver kid. A bona fide hero, it taunted as Izuku began grabbed at his body. You can't grab me. I'm fluid, he chuckled, don't worry, I'm just taking over your body. It'll only hurt for 45 seconds, the pain will go away very soon. Izuku continued to struggle against the slime villain, his laughter filling his mind as he clawed and raked away at the man. Quickly, his strength faded, and his vision did the same. Am I dying, he thought, and no. I still need to. I still wanted to. His voice began fading. Someone, please. Save me. Suddenly, the manhole cover the slime villain came out of popped off, revealing a fist that slowly climbed out. The sound had taken the villain's attention, causing it to stop its attack before he looked at the source of the sound with shock. Don't worry, young man. All Might said, stepping out of the hole, I am here. The slimy villain then gritted their teeth before swinging a slimy hand that only just narrowly missed the pro as he crouched and bolted at him. The villain then formed another hand, trying to squash the blonde crusader only for him to effortlessly dodge the attack and deliver one of his own. All Might / Texas smash. The attack came swiftly and hit the slime villain. With ease despite the distance, the wind pressure from the attack carrying all the way to the slime villain. Wind pressure. It thought, unable to believe that even a hero like All Might could achieve something like that. In the next moment, the slime villain burst and splattered against the walls, releasing Izuku from his hold. As Izuku fell to the ground, looking at his savior and favorite hero, he could only think of one thing. That move should have hit. Thinking back to the level he lost because of Bakugo. Hey! 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 All Might yelled, tapping Izuku's face as he tried waking the boy up. Hey! Oh, good, he said, watching as the boy began coming to. The moment Izuku opened his eyes, he couldn't help but crawl back from the shock. I'm glad you're doing okay. Sorry for getting you caught up in that villain fighting, All Might said. I'm not one to make mistakes like this, but I wasn't quite prepared, and my spirits were high on a day off in a new place, he said before giving his trademark heroic laugh. It was like a dream. Seeing his hero, in the flesh right after he had done what he did best. He was talking to him, having a conversation. Though it was pretty one-sided at the moment, but you were a big help. Thanks to you I was able to capture him safely, the blonde said, showing 2 bottles that were full of sludge villain. Come on. Say something. Izuku thought, the greatest hero is in front of you. Most people would die just to have an autograph. Wait, an autograph, he yelled, pulling out small notebook labeled, Hero Analysis for the Future volume. He then opened the book and flipped to an empty page, just for All Might to quickly put it down the moment he reached the blank pages. He did it already. Izuku exclaimed, looking down at the side pages before bowing repeatedly, thank you very much. This will be an heirloom. A family treasure. All Might then stuffed the villain into his pockets before giving a simple thumbs up. He had grown used to such reactions, being in the hero business, and all really drew out a lot of odd people. Well, I need to get this villain the police. I'll see you again, on the other side of the screen, he said before he began doing some stretches, preparing for a long-distance jump. Wait, already? Izuku asked. Pros are consistently fighting villains in time, he answered matter-of-factly. Wait. Izuku thought, I still have a question. A really important one. Well then, I'm counting on your continued support. All Might yelled as he jumped into the air, ending the small encounter he had with the occasional super fan. Wait, he said, before looking down and seeing the super fan had clung to his leg and was now soaring through the sky with him. Hey. Let go of me, your fanaticism is too much, he yelled, trying to push Izuku off. But if I let go now, I'll die, he said, struggling against the wind. That's true. All Might realized before stopping. I have a lot of things to ask you directly. Izuku said. Okay, I get it. All Might said, just close your eyes and mouth, he commanded, Izuku doing as he directed. He though before seeing a rooftop nearby. They landed with a loud thud, that was scary. Izuku trembled as All Might let out a sigh. Good grief. If you knock on the door I'm sure the people downstairs will let you down, but I'm seriously out of time, so I'll be going, he said, giving a small wave. Wait. Izuku begged. No, I will not wait. All Might said as he continued to the railing. At that moment, all of the negative things said to Izuku seemed to play in his mind on repeat. The BSTRD doctor that told him to give up, his mother apologizing to him and knowing he wouldn't amount to anything, Bakugo telling to take a swan dive off the roof. It all piled on him, strangely forcing out his voice. He had to know. To know if it all was worth it. All the pain and suffering he had endured. Even if I don't have a quirk, can I become a hero? The words came out clearer than anything Izuku had ever said in his life. So clear that they had stopped All Might in his tracks. Can someone without a quirk become as great as you? A moment then passed before smoke began coming off of All Might. Oh no, god damn it, All Might muttered, feeling his strength beginning to leave him. It's probably because I'm quirkless, but I get bullied a lot. Maybe that's also why. I don't know. But I think saving people is super cool. Saving people with a fearless smile. I want to be the greatest hero like you. He said, only then realizing that the greatest hero had deflated in front of him. Why you're deflating? Izuku yelled, surprised, wait. Up until now. Fake. You're a fake. You're so skinny. I am All Might dash, he tried to say, no way. Izuku retorted, still riddled with shock and disbelief. All Might then let out a sigh, you know those video games where you can get a power-up. It's a little like that, and no way, Izuku exclaimed, it can't be. All Might is fearless. He saves everyone with a smile. He's the greatest. A fearless smile, the pro said, thinking for a moment before he sat on the ground, with his back to the railing. He then let out a tired sigh, now that you've seen me young man, don't go telling anyone about this, even by accident, he said before lifting up his shirt and revealing a grievous wound that made Izuku recoil. It's an injury I got from an enemy attack 5 years ago, he explained, half of my respiratory organs were destroyed, and I lost a third of my stomach. I became emaciated from surgeries and the after effects. Right now I can only do hero work for about 8 hours a day. And no way. Izuku muttered, thinking back to a fight that could have caused that damage, 5 years ago. Was it the fight between you and Toxic Chainsaw? Or the Great Bludgeoner? You're well informed, but those punks couldn't lay a hand on me, he sighed, nursing the pain slightly. The battle wasn't made public, because I asked for it not to be. I will save people with a smile. The symbol of people will not be daunted by evil, I can't be. That's why I smile, to show the pressure of heroes, and to trick the fear inside of me. Pros are always risking their lives, I cannot simply say, you can become a hero even without a power. The words had hit Izuku harder than anything as a pain shot through his chest. I see, he said, the last of the air in his lungs. Leaving as he felt the weight of the words added onto the pile of pain that had forced him to speak, crush his body. If you want to help others, then you could become a police officer, the deflated hero said as he walked to the roof access. They get a lot of flack for having villains placed on their doorstep, but it's a respectable position. They do much more than a person would think as well. All Might then stopped at the doors, letting out another sigh. It's not bad to have dreams, kid, but be sure to notice the reality of them as well, he said before he closed the door behind himself, leaving Izuku alone on the roof. It was warm, strangely enough. His words weren't coated in sorrow or anger, they felt kind yet truthful, harsh yet welcoming, demeaning yet honest. It hurt more than anything that had piled onto him before, not because it was from the man he had now held in even higher regard, but because of how nice he was about putting him down. Izuku's legs then gave out, causing him to stumble to the ground. His heart beating out of his chest and filling his ears with the accursed sound. He wanted it to stop, to not have to listen to the ever-increasing noise, to not feel the crushing weight of his dreams failing again and again. At that moment he heard a loud explosion off in the distance. It had immediately reminded him of Bakugo. Believe you'll be born with a quirk in the next life, and take a swan dive off the roof. As the words repeated in his head, they somehow sounded less and less like they were intended to hurt him. They were almost like a cushion in his mind, something that had caught him, much like the explosion before. Izuku then looked up and saw the railing. It was only a few feet in front of him. He was multiple stories up, so it wouldn't hurt, not for long at least. With a new vigor Izuku pulled himself to his feet. His head clearer than any moment in his life. Each step was like another word, quirkless, pathetic, you should give up, I'm sorry, adding fuel to the rising pain in his chest as he stood on the building's railing and looked down into the alley down below. For a moment, he had felt hesitation. Maybe this isn't the way, he thought, but then the words came crashing down onto him again, disappointment, quirkless, burden. He then looked out and saw that the sun had slowly begun setting. He had been there longer than he thought. He then looked down again, his heart beating against his chest as the word swan dive repeated again and again as he leaned over before one thought had replaced every sound and murmur. It's not bad to have dreams, kid, but be sure to notice the reality of them as well. Suddenly wind had begun rushing past Izuku's ears as the ground grew closer. The weight of pain and disappointment weighing him down for an even faster descent. Although, as his life flashed before his eyes, he could only think of one thing. I hope my quirk is amazing. Splat. Chapter End. Chapter 2. Inko let out a labored sigh as she paced around the living room, occasionally looking at the TV. Just a few hours earlier it had reported the villain attack that Bakugo was caught up in, but apart from that scare, and the call she made that followed, filled with wailing and lots of crying, she was now worried about the safety of her own child. Even in recent years, Mustafa's villain population had been on an incline despite the many named heroes that had been in the city. From lowly thugs to mid-ranked villains, the problems had only continued to pile on in since the days she was a kid, only making her worry even more. He would have told me if you were going to the arcade today, she muttered, and even if there was new All Might merchandise he would have called the moment he got to the counter, then he'd remember he didn't have any money and call immediately for me to buy it for him, she continued, going over all the moments she had a similar scare, making sure to cover all the bases. Should I call the police now? She thought aloud, her worrying increasing, and no, not yet. He could have just forgotten to call me. Like that one time when a new All Might arcade system arrived at Gamer's Paradise and then he came home the moment he finished playing and apologized for being so late. Yeah, all I have to do is wait, she told herself, trying to calm down her heart as she sat down, still unable to take her eyes off of the screen. 12 hours later, police station, and the world seemed to warp the more time passed. He should be home, he should be home, he should be home, he should be home, he should be home. The words repeated again and again in her mind as she bit her nails, a bad habit that had formed from years of anxiety. Though, the moment she started her hands were smacked away from her mouth. Don't. A voice said. One that was stern and caring at the same time. Inko then looked up and saw Mitsuki, standing over her with an expression that was similar to hers, filled with worry and fear. Bakugo was there too, but he had a more annoyed expression as he looked away from the both, but she could see that he was worried too. Inko, Mitsuki said, pulling the woman's gaze to her before she gave a bright yet forced smile, I'm sure he's fine. You know how he can get with those video games, it's like he's in another world. He's probably at some arcade or something, playing some sort of game. Bakugo then let out a low scoff, on that was low enough for no one else to hear, that nerd's being a burden again, he thought, all that dumbass ever does is make Inko worry. He needs to accept his place in this world as just some side character working a dead-end job like the rest of these BSTRDS. Just then, a police officer came over, holding a small clipboard in his paws. "Mrs. Inko," he said, "we just need to confirm some information, could you please come with us?" "Could we go with her?" Mitsuki asked. "That's fine," the officer said before Mitsuki helped Inko out of the seat, and was further helped by Bakugo to one of the waiting rooms. Elsewhere in Muzutafu, from the moment Izuku awoke again, his eyes were fixed on one place for what felt like hours. A screen, almost like a game window, no, exactly like a game window. It seemed to shine in the darkness of the alley, giving off a dim blue glow that reminded him of an LED. Then, for what had felt like the millionth time, he read what the screen had displayed again: "Quirk active." The words were simple and straightforward, but the simplicity was almost frustrating. For years he had been ridiculed, beaten, and verbally assaulted for not having one, and now it was just displaying itself like it hadn't been the root of all his problems. This must be some cruel joke. He thought, I must have went to hell, and now they're toying with my soul. Just then the screen went to the status menu, showing his less than mediocre statistics. His health then tricked down slightly by a small decimal. These stats are horrible, he muttered, putting a hand over his mouth. My defense is higher than the rest, but only by a small margin. My strength might as well not be there, my speed the same, along with my agility, but my intelligence trumps over all of them. It would be alright for a long range maybe, but those tend to fall apart quickly when it comes to anything close, sometimes even mid-range, so I should probably train he trailed off, a strange feeling starting to develop in his chest. He couldn't help but grab it as it increased along with his heart rate. Pounding faster and faster, like the chugging of a train. He remembered this feeling, something he had felt at the height of a battle, or the moment he turned the tables with a special combo. It was excitement, but it wasn't normal. Slowly his heart rate had increased, steadily, as he came to realize that this may be a reality. But there was only one way he could be sure it was real. I need to train, he muttered to himself, a smile coming to his face before he almost immediately got on his hands to do some push-ups, failing the first one before he forced himself to complete the second. At that moment, he saw something in his peripheral, a numerical value, 1 plus strength, 17 hours, time frame. Police officers were immediately dispatched the moment Inko finished filing the missing persons report. First they searched the obvious: schools, pathways home, normal places that students would usually take. Students' route, evidence number 1, residue of a slime villain that All Might had brought in earlier that day. Evidence number 2, scent of Izuku Midoriya reported by Simons, BLD Hound quirk, presence of All Might at the scene, likely due to villain. Personal routes, lack of evidence. There weren't any sightings of Izuku Midoriya on the day of his disappearance in any of the locations Inko Midoriya provided. Arcade, gaming heroes, store, and an All Might themed cafe. Status of search, expanding to less specific. The areas surrounding these locations, pathways, and further questioning of those could have seen the missing person. Witnesses, All Might somewhere in Muzutafu. Izuku let out a low huff as he looked at his new stats. STG, 2 6 def, 5 con, 4 3 agi, 5 8 int, 9 1. The stats were still terrible, but they seemed to genuinely reflect his body's conditions. Not only that, the results felt almost immediate. Despite the great fatigue he was feeling. With a sigh he sat down on the ground, catching his breath. This must be real, he huffed. I can feel my body changing. It's little, but it's better than having nothing, he smiled, tears rolling down his cheeks. Finally. I finally have a quirk, he muttered to himself, feeling the excitement finally begin to die down and be replaced with a sense of accomplishment. He had something he had strived for years. After torment, pain, and despair, he had finally been at the same level as everyone else. It felt good. It felt sharp. Rest now, wandering soul, Izuku heard, whispered into his ear, these nights of long-lasting unease are over. The teen then looked down and saw a knife had been forced into his chest. He could feel his heart beating against it, tearing more and more as it continued to beat. His vision began to grow darker. For just a few moments, his eyes focused on his status window as he watched his life drain away. He died. Again. Midoriya household Inko let out a breath, one that was shaky as she trembled with both fear and worry. In her hands was a picture of Izuku from when he was younger, one that had been taken before he learned he was going to be quirkless. His smile was so much brighter, almost blinding despite it being a picture. It made her think of the better years of their life, the blissful ignorance that they both had, and how not knowing the truth had made their lives so much brighter, but now. All she could feel was a sea of sorrow. Gray in color as she looked into its depths, unable to see even a beginning over the horizon or an end to the abyss below her. She wanted to be ignorant again. To think that Izuku was just out playing video games at some new arcade that had popped up, and he simply forgot to call her again but. She knew that bliss would only last for so long, because her son's room was still empty and devoid of her somber child. Muzutafu Streets. A small group of police officers just finished scoping the gaming district of Muzutafu, catching a few shady deals but ultimately failing to find the person they had arrived for in the first place. Well, that was a bust, Genzi said, wiping some of the sweat from his brow as he was tailed by his assigned group. I thought that would have worked, Hai said, letting out a sigh as she pouted. I was sure that the kid would have been around here. His scent is here. Though it's faint, Jay said, the only one amongst them with a dog quirk. He's definitely been here before, just not anytime soon. I still can't believe he went to that All Might cafe so much though, he sighed. The kid's probably a super fan, Genzi said, though most kids his age grow out of that already. But from what his friend said it seems like he's a bit different from most of the crowd. That Bakugo kid's a BSTRD, Hai said, who talks about their missing friend like that. Or to anyone for that matter. Don't worry about him, Genzi sighed, people like him will get a reality check in due time, right now we need to focus on finding that kid. At that moment Jay began sniffing the air, almost like he had recognized something. A small group of police officers collectively let out a sigh as they finished their checklist of arcades, gaming stores, and hero merch stores that collectively made up the gaming district as many called it. They had been able to stop a few illegal transactions, trades, and even a robbery, but ultimately they had failed to get even a clue on the whereabouts of Izuku Midoriya. Well, that could have gone better, Genzi sighed, wiping some of the sweat from his brow, tailed by his designated search group. Yeah, I was sure we would have picked up something, Hai sighed, tugging on her pink hair. I was sure we would have at least see him somewhere around here. His scent is here at least, though it's faint we can at least confirm that this is a place he would go to if he were to turn up again, Jay said, the only one out of the three with a dog quirk, though, I'm a little surprised he went to that All Might themed cafe so much. The food wasn't even that good. The kid's probably a super fan, Genzi sighed, though most his age would have grown out of that fanboy phase, but from what we got from his friend, I think it's safe to assume that he's a little different from the usual crowd. You know what, I'll say it, Hai declared, that Bakugo kid's a little BSTRD. Who the hell would talk about a missing person like that, much less the way he talked to the detectives like they were pieces of gum under his shoe or some SHT, she pouted. Genzi let out a sigh at Hai's rambling. Don't worry about him, he said, people like that will get their reality check soon enough, right now we need to focus on ensure the safety of this kid, he explained, Jay then taking a moment to sniff the air. What is it? You smell something suspicious. Hai asked, pinning her head to the side. It's the kid, he said, Jay finished, their expressions going dark as they realized what Jay could be hinting at. Without another word, they quickly followed Jay, trusting his nose as they went further past the gaming district into the vicinity of where the sludge villain had been last seen. Somewhere in Muzutafu Izuku looked up to the night sky as he struggled to breath, feeling the knife once again break through his flesh and draw chapter end Deku. Reborn gamer Izuku stared into the red abyss that had surrounded him, a throbbing pain once again filling his head as he stared into his reflection. His eyes, they were fading again for what felt like the 100th time, losing their luster as more was added to the Red Sea. Soon, his vision faded as well, covering him once again from the sorry sight that was his death. Before he was met with his dead eyes yet again. Near the sludge villain sighting, Jay sniffed the air, allowing his animalistic instincts to take over as his face continued to grimace. The smell of copper had yet to dissipate, meaning that it could be attached to the missing person, which wasn't a good sign in the slightest. "This is near the second sighting of the sludge villain attack," Genzi said. "From the cameras there weren't any sightings of anyone fitting his description, so he's at least not in the immediate area." "Wouldn't this place already searched?" Hai asked. "I'd figure if there were residues of that slime villain, then the areas he was discovered should be top priority." "That's because of the press," Genzi sighed. "They hound the areas both during and after villain attacks, and because of All Might it was practically a wall of fanboys and news reporters. Not to mention the smell." Jay shivered, remembering the thick cloud of raw sweat and days of not washing. "It's like walking through an anime convent dash." He started before his head suddenly turned on a dime. "There," he said, looking down an alley. "The main source of the putrid copper smell. Elsewhere in Mizurufu, of course." "Why didn't I see it before?" the man yelled, a sick grin on his face. "The only way to cleanse a soul is through the burning embrace of fire," he preached, clawing at his face as he breathed in the sweet tang of gasoline. And seemed to be pleading for his life. It was Izuku, on the ground as his tears continued to flow, breathing in the liquid that he knew would burn him alive. It's not fair," he thought, gritting his teeth as he looked at the deranged man standing over him. "Why am I being tortured because of my quirk? I wait for so long to be normal, and only a moment later the world pulls me back down to kill me again. It's not fair." He tried to scream, only for his voice to fall upon deaf ears. "Do not worry, young wanderer, with the pure cleanse of flames, your endless struggle will finally come to an end," the man muttered, lighting a small flame with the help of a match, tossing the small object on the ground before made contact with the liquid. It had been an instant for the man, but Izuku could see every flip of the match, waft of the flame, to the very moment it engulfed him in a sea of flames, and he let out a scream of pain and horror. Near the sludge villain sighting, within a matter of moments the place was flooded police cars, containing forensic teams and detectives who were quickly able to analyze the scene with the help of quirks and critical thinking. Evidence 1 # splatter from high velocity, likely from the roof of the office building to the left of the alley, procured through both scent and visual splatter. Evidence 2 # sense, All Might and Izuku Midoriya. Evidence 3 # torn clothing, likely from the Aldera High uniform. Evidence 4 # no body. It's not known where the body could have gone, but it wouldn't be likely for the suspect to be alive. Evidence 5 # trace amounts of biomass in the surrounding area. Spinal fluid, gray matter, and small amounts of flesh, will be sent to lab for testing. Evidence 6 # footprints from an unknown suspect, streaked and with no clear pattern. Size, 25, this is 9 in American, suspects, All Might, unknown person. Elsewhere in Mizurufu the man listened to Izuku's screams as a smile spread across his face. It was akin to a symphony, though more along the lines of a cacophony of pain from a single source. "Yes, release your crying soul," the man sighed. "May your next life be one filled with love and happiness, and the dreams you once had come into fruition." The words were like poison to Izuku's ears, not because it had been so contradictory but because they reminded him so much of what Bakugo had said only. To pray for a quirk in his next life, for his dream to become a reality. It had already happened. He took his friend's advice and jumped, splattered on the ground with little thought, and was reborn with a quirk. He had felt like he was given a gift that was long overdue, and the man before him was using it like a weapon. It angered him so much. The pain, his laughter, his voice, the gleeful look in his eyes. He hated him. He wanted him to suffer as he did. He wanted him to die. The man let out a sigh as he listened to Izuku's scream slowly die down. He felt a little disheartened at the dying sound, but it had meant the soul was finally ascending to the higher plane. Though, he couldn't help but try to listen closer, over the crackling of the flames on charred flesh, to hear the final breath of life leave the broken vessel before a hand broke through the flames and pulled him in. "Stop. What are you doing?" His voice was starting to grow tired. "I was sending you to the afterlife." A better world. His skin seared and charred, peeling away as the hands of his patient held him in the fire, a demon. That's what you are. A creature from hell born to stop the rapture of man. He kicked, beat, screamed, and bludgeoned the being that held him, trying to break free from the grasp of the burning flames. Let go of me, foul demon. The words had no effect as his strength continued to dwindle. His curses toward the demon had been treated like simple fodder, only fueling its vigor like the gasoline to fire, pulling him closer to the depths of hell like the sinners he had met all those years ago. And no. He choked, the smoke of the flame filling his lungs. And not ye, he sputtered, I still have to. The Lord still calls for. NNNNHH, he let out one final screech, reaching for the moon that was placed so high above the sky, much like the sun, but as he tried the charred hand of the demon pulled him back down to his demise. He then sat up, slowly as if he didn't want to wake the man at his side. Strangely, he felt lighter, as if his body was like a feather. Izuku let out a huff as he awoke once again, letting out a small sigh as he realized the fire had finally stopped. He then looked over himself, making sure he wasn't horribly disfigured. His skin was fine, no longer charred and breaking apart. He could breathe again, no more smoke, but the smell of gasoline still lingered. With a small sigh, Izuku looked to his side and saw the body of the man. It was charred, more so than he had ever been, but that was probably because he wouldn't be coming back. His face, though, was warped with anguish. He must have truly believed the crazy things he was saying. He then let out another sigh as he turned his eyes to the sky, allowing himself to relax just a bit. The sun had only just begun to rise. Precinct Man let out a small sigh as he adjusted his tie. This wasn't something he'd ever thought he'd do. Or anyone would do at any point in their lives, but duty called. With another breath he entered the interrogation room and tried to compose himself. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to come here, All Might, Detective Ken said as he took a seat. It is truly not a problem, the hero said. I was never one to criticize the process of catching criminals, each part is truly essential after all. Thank you for your cooperation, Ken said before he began riffling through the gathered evidence, already beginning to analyze the body language and speak of the hero before him. So, what do you know about a student named Izuku Midoriya? Chapter End Chapter 4 STG, 6th 2 Def, 5 1 Con, 3 6 Agi, 8 Int, 1 Izuku looked at his stats with slight anguish. It was almost ironic how he got stronger from suffering, but he wouldn't put it against his quirk, he couldn't. It had single-handedly kept him alive, and even decided to give him a bit of a reward despite burning to death over and over again. He then let out a small sigh as he looked in front of him, rereading his screen like he had done many times. Though now it had revealed a feature he didn't know before. The path to becoming a hero. Becoming a hero is the dream of many, but you have to prove yourself and take chances to truly excel. Take out 05 Thugs reward, 30,000 yen, new clothes, knife. It was a quest, and likely the first of many he would have to take to live up to his dreams. Though the second reward was a little weird, but Izuku then looked down at what he was wearing, realizing that it had looked like a black rag than the Aldra High uniform. He then took a break, bracing himself for a fight before he went to search for the thugs his quirk ordered him to defeat. STG, 2 6 Def, 1 4 Con, 6 greater than 9 Agi, 8 greater than 2 Int, 1 His leg was broken, his lung had been punctured with a knife, and with the various other wounds it was his total loss. He then glanced at his mission. Take out 5 thugs. He had actually gotten much further than he thought he would, though it was an attack with a brick which sadly crumpled away when the one with a minor strength quirk kicked him into a wall. Although strangely enough, despite his wounds he felt like he had gotten closer to beating them than he ever would in his past. They also looked a little worse for wear. If you squint. Just then, one of them kicked Izuku in his jaw before another dragged him off. Hey man, that's enough, one of the thugs said, you'll kill the poor bstrd. Get the F off me. This little SHT deserves it. He growled, trying to break free. The words grazed Izuku's ears for only a moment. It wasn't a bad idea actually. Izuku then reached for the knife lodged in his chest and pulled it out. He could immediately feel his breathing become almost impossible, but that wouldn't matter for much longer. What the hell, the attacking thug said before Izuku plunged the knife in his head. It was only a few moments, the wave of shock that had rolled over the remaining 4 thugs before the knife fell and the teen that had only just ended his own life came back at them again. This time, fully healed and lacking any injury he had before. Why yes. Izuku cheered, standing over the defeated thugs, finally. I finally did it. I proved myself as a hero. Just then, the screen popped up again, quest completed. Collect your rewards. Izuku looked at the screen with expectation, waiting for the items to magically appear before he saw a light glow begin to emit from the defeated thugs. It wrapped around a few of the thugs' clothes, and also came from their pockets. He had seen this before, it was a form of loot beam so the player would know what to pick up and where the item was. I have to get it myself. He thought before he walked over and pulled some money out of one of the thugs' pockets before a number popped up in his vision. Plus 7,000 yen. So it is like that, he muttered to himself, remembering a vigilante game that had the same mechanic. It had been called, The Shadow of Greatness. It was pretty controversial, like most vigilante games, but the mechanic made it far worse despite it making sense. It was also his favorite vigilante games as well, but that didn't make it any less wrong. He wanted to be a hero, he couldn't be doing stuff like this if he were going to strive for. Izuku let out a small sigh as he sat on the ground, looking at the money in his hands and his tattered clothes. He was hungry. His quirk didn't feed him, and if anything it only made him hungrier. His stomach then let out a growl, wordlessly confirming Izuku's next actions. Precinct, and that's all I know of that young lad, All Might said, his expression going from a heroic smile to a grimace of sorrow. It's alright, thank you again for complying, Ken said, taking down the last of the information before he let out a sigh. Do you mind if I deviate a little from the questions? He asked, catching the hero's gaze. Feel free to, he said, flashing a wide smile. A little small talk tends to lighten the mood during these difficult times. Thank you, but this is probably going to make this a little heavier, Ken said, letting out a breath before pulling up the evidence. We have reason to believe that the student you talked to wasn't killed, he said, causing All Might's expression to transform into shock and the mild gratitude before Ken had finished. We think that this was a suicide. Almighty Burger Stop. Izuku let out a satisfied sigh as he pulled down his mask and started to eat his favorite. The almighty meal, fitted with the all-hearty smash burger, Crime Stopper fries with hellfire sauce, empty-lady-sized lemon lime soda, and finally their specialty made Mirko bunny ear cookies stuffed with chocolate. He let out another hum as he indulged in the burger, savoring the flavor as he contemplated. The money he used was stolen off of a man, so were the clothes off his back. Well, aside from the underwear and mask, it wouldn't have been sanitary, but it was a good thing he did. The closest place that sold clothes was only a hero merch store that he frequented, and those clothes were pretty costly since they were mostly limited edition. With another small groan he looked at his status screen, particularly at the money section. He was now down to 23, the meal had costed nearly 4,000 yen, the mask 1,000, and the boxers had been on sale. If he continued to eat at Almighty he would be broke in just a few days. He then let out a sigh before he continued to the Crime Stopper fries. He didn't really pay much mind to how much something had cost before now. His mother would always give him something without much thought. Probably because he had begged her so much, but now that he was faced with his limited funds the perspective had taken a pretty heavy toll. Maybe I should go back, he said to himself, absent-mindedly eating the fries before that kick of the spice grounded him some. No. I would just be a burden again, he sighed, finishing off the fries. I need to make something of myself before then, so she doesn't have to look at me with such eyes. Izuku quickly threw his trash away, taking out his cookie like usual to eat it on the way home, although this time he was just going to be searching for a place to stay. Mainly because staying out had not only been the worst experience of his life, but also because he knew the nights weren't going to be as warm. As he was leaving the restaurant, he ended up bumping into someone. Sorry, he said, "Are you okay?" The other person then let out a small huff before they looked down at Izuku. Her eyes were red and gave off an almost animalistic presence which was probably explained by her rabbit ears, though they were pointed downwards and blended in with her hair. Her skin was also darker, not chocolate but more like a caramel macchiato. It made it pretty easy to recognize who she was, but there was also the name tag that suddenly appeared beside her head. I'm Mirko. He though, almost exploding with his fanboy nature before he quickly calmed himself. W8. She definitely doesn't want to be found out. He concluded, even if it's a bad disguise, she likely just needed to grab something quick. So I should just get out of her hair and dash, excuse me. The rabbit hero said, giving an annoyed glare through her sunglasses. Could you dash? Sorry, he interrupted before stepping out the way. I just blanked out for a second. My bad, he said before rushing off, leaving the rabbit hero in a confused state before she simply brushed it off and entered the fast food joint. Hey look. It's the pro hero Mirko, someone suddenly yelled, making her day suddenly even more annoying. With one final bite, Izuku finished off his cookie, throwing away the wrapper as he continued walking down the dimly lit road. He had been wondering for a few hours, looking for a place that wouldn't ask too many questions about where the money was from, or who he was. The last thing he wanted was his mother worrying over him and sending the police before he could fully repay her. Soon he had reached the other side of town, a place that had a more frequent and denser rate of crime. If anything it would be more beneficial, the more villains there are the more money he can make. After a little more walking, he found a small motel. It was run down, falling apart at its seams, and had a pungent smell of copper that seemed to linger. It was perfect. Izuku then approached a small building that was outside the motel, an office from what it looked like. He then knocked on the door, receiving a low and annoyed grumbling before the door swung open, nearly hitting him. What the hell do you want? The man said. He was pudgy, wore a stained tank top, and smelled like vomit and beer. I would like to purchase a room, he said, giving a polite tone. We're closed, he said simply before slamming the door shut. A few moments then passed before Izuku let out a sigh, considering going even deeper into the district before he saw his screen pop up, giving him a mission. A base of operations. A protector of any type, hero, or vigilante, must have a base of operations to work out of. A place like this only comes once in a blue moon, don't miss this chance. Make the owner give you a room, level of persuasion reward, room 205. As he read the mission, Izuku let out a sigh and began thinking of a way to fulfill the mission. The man was pretty adamant about not letting him in, but even if they were actually closed he could have been nicer about it. As the thought about the man's manners crossed his mind, Izuku remembered where he was, the rugged and unforgiving part of Japan that was littered with villains and criminals alike. Meaning that none of them would generally care about a polite approach, and if anything they'd see it as weakness. After composing himself, Izuku took a breath before he pulled his leg back and kicked the door open, breaking the doorframe. What the hell? The man yelled, popping up from his seat. Hey. Didn't I tell you that? Dash, he started before Izuku threw a knife at him, striking his hand. The man yelled, trying to nurse his hand, only to realize the knife had stuck it to the table. Oh. Oh no, Izuku thought, looking at the wailing man, I was aiming for the wall. He thought, almost panicking before he forced himself to continue, You give me a room, he demanded, slamming his hand against the table. Alright you crazy bstrd, he yelled, scrambling to open his desk before throwing the keys at Izuku. The teen then snatching them out of the air before reading the number on them. Yes, he muttered before looking back at the man, so how much do I pa dash? Just leave me alone you crazy F, he yelled as tears began streaming from his eyes as he reeled from the pain. Oh. Okay, he said, looking around awkwardly for a moment before taking the knife from the man's hand, earning another yelp of pain. Sorry I really need this, it's the only one I have, he yelled, leaving the man to nurse his bleeding hand, only adding to the smell of copper that lingered around the property. Chapter End. Chapter 5, Time Skip. 1 month later, STG, 6th to death, 4 greater than 10 con, 9 8 agi, 2 2 int, 3 7 ff, Izuku muttered, feeling the knife enter his lung before he gritted his teeth and struck the thug, sending him to the ground. Izuku followed soon after, wheezing as he tried to fruitlessly get air into his lungs. "See, come on," he told himself as he reached for his knife, nearly getting it before it had been kicked out of reach. "Dumbass," a thug said, glaring down at Izuku. "Still kicking after all this SHT, he roared, kicking Izuku in his torso, worsening his wound. "You think you're some hot SHT just because you took out a few of us," he berated. "You dumb FBSTRD," he continued, trying to land another kick, only for Izuku's knife to be lodged in his foot. "Ugh, you dash," he started before Izuku grabbed his leg and took him to the ground. "You undying son of a dash," he tried to retort, only for Izuku to deliver a final blow to his jaw, knocking him out like the others from his gang that surrounded them. Con plus 01 plus 01 plus 01. Izuku winced as he tightened his bandages, ensuring his wounds would heal correctly. He had learned a while ago that, even though it's tedious, the process of healing yielded more results than him dying and getting immediate results. It raised his constitution, and because it was equivalent to a handicap it also raised strength depending on what he did. He then finished bandaging himself with a final wince before he turned to his gaming setup. A simple small flat screen TV, a decent gaming console, the RSV3, and a few of his favorite games he was able to nab at half price. It was far from the setup he used to have, at least 15 million yen with everything he had, making for an amazing experience, but now that he was reduced to his current one that costed less than a fraction of that, he realized how much he put on his mother. He would need to be gone for far longer than he thought. Suddenly, a knock came from his door. "Coming," he said, adjusting his arm splint before answering the door. As he opened it, the sun was blocked out, covering him in a towering shadow. Izuku then looked up, facing a large man covered with scars, looking down at him with an unchanging expression. He was a villain, one that Izuku knew well because the man had fought All Might on at least 2 occasions. The serrated bullet, a known villain from Russia who had been evading the public eye for a long while. "I see you've gotten yourself into trouble." Once again, the man glared at Izuku to let out a chuckle. "Well, if the training was easy I wouldn't be doing it." "How've you been, Igor?" he asked, giving a smile that caused the villain to sigh. "I don't know what sort of training puts you into this state, even I didn't look like this when I was younger," he sighed. "Here, take some more remedies. This one is from a friend overseas who specializes in quirk-based healing factors." She also included some instructions in bag. His Japanese was surprisingly fluid, though he did have his occasional slip-up. "Thank you," Izuku said, smiling as he took the items with his free hand. "Hope you have a nice day," he finished, receiving a nod from the man before closing the door. He let out a breath, silently thanking Igor again for bringing him the remedies. After moving around a few things, Izuku placed the bag on his coffee table and began reading the paper. It had been in Russian, definitely meant for Igor, but thankfully he knew a little. He then glanced over to his skill board and read the skills section. Russian LV1. It had suddenly popped up when Igor had first given him some remedies. He couldn't read the language but could easily recognize it from the games he played. He also didn't want to bother Igor again just because he couldn't read the language and decided to use a translator, and the skill formed as a result. Not long after, his quirk did an evaluation of some sort and came up with a list of skills he had. From what he could gather, it was connected to his intelligence and a lot like how he evaluated heroes and their quirks. Though they didn't seem to do anything aside from display his abilities, maybe with a little positive adjustment. Izuku then tried to read the Russian words, connecting dots in his mind to just barely come up with a broken and janky translation to Japanese. Although, he ultimately knew he would have to resort to the translator device again when he realized the first step was to make a pancake sing Rasputin. Int plus 1 plus 1. It was a lot easier for him to raise his intelligence, probably because he had a LV5 skill called Nerd, but he wouldn't easily admit to that. He could read something informative, learn a language, or even do some research on heroes which seemed to yield the most, likely due to his LV-9 hero fanatic skill. He was currently doing some research on the latest heroes, a few new ones that came from Seijin. They seemed to have taken the ninja aesthetic that the school showcased, and even had quirks that complemented the style. It was a great addition to his new journal he was working on, Hero Analysis Dash. He didn't need to add 4 for the future anymore, so he thought it was a good idea to start a new series of them. It was a good thing he did too, because he found himself making the notes even more detailed than before. Intricate drawings, detailed descriptions, and even lengthy, yet logical quirk analyzations. After a while, Izuku stopped his research and applied the remedy Igor gave him as per the directions. As he applied, the day he met him replayed in his head, causing him to let out a small chuckle at the absurdity of the encounter. A few weeks ago Izuku grunted as he felt a knife enter his side, tearing away at his lung before it was dragged down, gashing his side even more so. Take that you. BSTRD, the assailant said before hitting the ground, unable to continue from the attacks he previously endured. Izuku followed not long after. Ow, he muttered, feeling the familiar grasp of death again. It was a process that he had grown used to, the numbing and cold were similar to any other day, but reaching that point was what made him hate it the most. Soon, his vision faded to a familiar and encompassing black, making him wait for the inevitable yet again. But nothing happened. And then he woke up. Izuku's eyes slowly opened, he was tired, racked with a mellow pain that forced him to stay in place, and a throbbing feeling that had hurt more than anything that came from where he had his fatal wound. This was a new sensation, not only because this was the first time he didn't simply die, but also because he was in a different place. It was a small room, one that very heavily leaned into the Japanese style with tatami flooring, paper sliding doors, and even a potted bamboo plant in the corner. Soon after he awoke, Izuku could hear a man speaking in a language he couldn't understand. It sounded rough almost, but surprising he could recognize it as Russian from a few video games he played. After finishing the call, the man opened the door, sliding it across and revealing a towering figure covered in scars. That alone was intimidating, but what made it terrifying was that Izuku had recognized the man. The serrated bullet, a Russian villain that had multiple encounters with high-ranking heroes, the highest-ranking one being All Might himself. "Hello," he said, in a surprisingly fluid Japanese, "I found you a few days ago near my home, you should be able at full health soon enough you have. Strong healing factor," he said before he walked to the other side of the room and picked up a small cup. Or at least it looked small in his hands. "Here, this will speed up the process, drink it slow," he instructed as he handed it to Izuku. He did as instructed, partially out of fear, and drank the concoction. It tasted sweet at first, but somehow had a savory aftertaste. A number then appeared in the corner of his eye. Con plus 01 plus 01. He was somehow getting a steady flow of points after drinking the liquid. He wanted to look into further, but his train of thought was interrupted by the villain. "So, what is a young child like you doing on this decrepit part of Japan?" he asked, his voice low and undemanding. "Training," Izuku stammered, still scared to the notorious villain. "That didn't seem much along line of training," the villain retorted. "Training should be controlled, not with the possibility of death at a simple false move," he said, stumbling over his pronunciation some. "It's practical training," Izuku said, looking away. "Practical training for what?" the villain asked, a gravitas entering his tone. Heroing," he said. He knew that it wasn't the smartest thing to say, but he was more afraid to say nothing at all or to even come up with a shabby lie. "That's not a bad profession," the villain sighed, "but what you're doing is called vigilantism, which is a crime," he explained, "though you are doing it with good intentions, which is more commendable than most spinless heroes that exist." His words surprised Izuku. Not only because he didn't attack at the fact he was training to be a hero but also because he had reprimanded him for going against the law. He then grabbed Izuku's unbandaged arm. "You're still too weak to deal with normal villains," he said, "you should build up some body mass before this practical training, but for now you should rest," he finished as he stood up. "My name is Igor, I won't ask for yours, though a name would be nice for reference. You Deku, you can call me Deku. Present-day Izuku awoke with a yawn, patting down his side to make sure that it healed well. Aside from some slight pain, everything seemed to be fine and decently healed. A little perk from his constitution is that he could heal a little faster than most depending on its level. With a little less pain than before, he hopped of bed and put on his crime-fighting clothes. A puffy jacket, a worn bulletproof vest from Igor, jeans, and his red sneakers. It wasn't much, but it had helped him get through the last week. Despite the knife wounds. With his last item, a small knife, he set out to once again do what he had been since he first arrived at the motel. Complete quest. Toga sighed as she nursed her arm, recuperating from the pain of her earlier hunt. The BSTRD had a gun up his sleeve and was able to fire off a few shots before she finished him off. It was a lot less enjoyable and more annoying than anything, and of course she was stuck walking home with an obvious wound. Just her luck. As she toiled along, she was quickly swarmed by the low lives that encompassed the area. "Hey babe, you seem kinda hurt," one of them said, putting a hand over her shoulder as she let out an annoyed sigh. "Look," she said simply, "I'll leave you all intact if you F off now," she sighed, fixing her stance as they chuckled. "Oh come on, you don't need to be so hostile," another said, reaching a hand around that Toga quickly swatted. "Gah. You beach," he cursed, holding his now bleeding hand before looking back at the sharp-eyed blonde. "Well, I gave you a chance," she smirked. "Now, scream for me will ya," she said, charging at the men only to be stopped when the one she was attacking suddenly flew off to the side. "Who the hell is this?" one of them said, jumping back. "It's that vigilante BSTRD. Don't let him dash." Before he could finish, the man attacked him, locking him in a small bout that the other two quickly joined in. As the battle unfolded, Toga watched with slight intrigue. Not because she was surprised someone had helped her, many have to score some needless points with her, but what had taken her attention was his lack of self-preservation. He helper had. He took blow after blow, cut and slash without another thought. It sent a satisfying shiver down her spine. "Thank you Hiro-kun," she smiled, delivering a wide grin laced with hidden intent. Maybe she could drain him of a few things before killing him. The man then turned to her, an unfamiliar yet strangely alluring gleam in his eyes. "Hello. Are you okay?" he asked, his voice sounding more along the lines of someone her age. "Maybe a little younger." "Oh. Of course you are. Hold on," he said, picking her up with surprisingly no effort despite the wounds he had. "Why you don't have tea dash," she tried to retort. "Don't worry about it. It's my duty as a hero," he said enthusiastically before running to a place Toga barely knew. "Well, I wanted to take it slowly but I guess I can work with this," she thought, a smile coming across her face once again. Chapter End. Chapter 6. Toga let out a small hum as Izuku gingerly wrapped a bandage around her arm. It was strangely nice, and the hero even put something over her wounds to numb them, so that's a plus. "Hold on, just a bit longer," Izuku said, applying a small amount of adhesive to the final strp of bandage before tucking it and smoothing it out. "I'm not good at bandaging yet, so this will have to do." It would help if the instructions weren't in Russian, but it should hold, he smiled, giving a satisfied huff before he packed up his medical supplies and headed to his kitchen. "I'll give a remedy to make the healing process faster," he said, pulling out more items from the fridge. "It'll just take a few minutes," he chirped. It was almost cute in a way. How he was doing so much to make sure she was okay, or at least making sure she was going to be okay, though it was going to be short-lived. A smile then spread across Toga's face as she slowly pulled out a knife from her long sock. She needed money, and this kid was likely the only source she would be able to tap for a while. As Izuku boiled the strange mixture of herbs, Toga slowly crept up on him. Sneaking and making sure to not call any attention to herself, reading her knife, and slowly beginning to wrap it around his neck before a knock came from the door. Immediately, Toga jumped back and started acting nonchalant. "Oh give me a," he started before he noticed that Toga had changed positions. "You really shouldn't move, it could make the wounds worse, he said before hurrying over to the door. Toga then let out a small huff, annoyed at the sudden interruption but still not put off from her goal. She decided she could just wait a little, or maybe even get something from them both if she were lucky, but the moment the visitor entered she quickly discarded the second idea. Igor. Thanks for coming by. Izuku said, walking past the living room, the herbs and stuff are really a big help. I was running low too, so it's even better you came over. Just then, a towering man walked into the living room. A person she could only guess was the Igor Izuku welcomed. The moment they locked eyes, Toga could tell that she had gotten herself into a situation that was much deeper than she thought. Deku, who is this girl? He asked. Oh, she's a girl I saved earlier, Izuku said. She was hurt pretty bad, so I bandaged her up. I'm making the liquid remedy now. Good, good, Igor said, taking a seat adjacent to Toga, keeping his gaze on her with a staggering glare. Hey, I think I left some things in my home, just a bag in my living room. Could you go grab it for me? He asked. But I still have to dash, Izuku began. Don't worry, I'll take care of your friend, Igor said. The door is still open, so you'll be able to grab it quickly. Alright, I'll be right back. Izuku said, rushing out the house as to not waste any time. The moment Izuku closed the door, Igor's gaze turned into something more befitting of his title. What are you doing here, villain? He seethed. I'm just here because that kid saved me, she said. I was just getting back from having a good time myself. Well, at least it was before they pulled out a gun, and I was suddenly surrounded by a group of low-level thugs, she explained. I was going to kill them, but that cute little hero came swooping in and I couldn't help but watch, she hummed. That boy isn't something for your perverted gaze, he scolded. He's not like you. He's a born hero, a boy that will grow into a man capable of inspiring the youth for generations. That's rich coming from you, she chuckled. I know that look in your eyes. You want to kill me, don't you? She asked, pinning her head to the side. But, I don't think you will as long as that kid's with me. I wonder why. That is none of your business. Igor said, his scowl becoming more adorned with anger before the front door opened. I'm back. Izuku called as he entered the living room. I got the bag from your fridge. As Izuku placed the bag on the table, Igor let out a sigh, calming himself down. I think it's time for your friend to leave, Deku, he said. But I'm still not done with. I made some before coming, he said, reaching into the bag Izuku brought. Yours tend to have slight deviations from the original recipe, though is fine. It's good to have original for reference, he advised. Now take this and go. I have something I need to talk about with Deku, he sneered, tossing the bottle to Toga. Fine, she sighed, getting up and leaving, though not before caressing an arm around Izuku for a few moments. See you later, hero, she said, causing the boy to blush a little before she left. Igor then let out a small huff. Hey kid, he said, pulling the teen's attention back to him, how about I teach you a little something about bodybuilding? 3 weeks later, STG, plus. 5 plus. 5 plus. 5 Izuku let out a pained grunt as he pushed up once again. Come on. Come on. My grandma could do this in her sleep, Igor berated. Quite literally, she made it a point to be able to pick up all her grandkids no matter their age. Ah, my babushka was an amazing woman, he smiled before Izuku fell to the ground. Igor then let out a low humph. Good work, you've improved much more than last time, and in less than half the time, he smiled as he got off of Izuku, the teen letting out a sigh as he peeked at his stat screen. STG, 2-5 def, 10-1 con, 8-9 agi, 2-8 int, 7-3 he's had. Astronomical growth compared to before, though the price was his days consistently being filled with non-stop training and lack of vigilante activities. Igor's training was ruthless, barely allowing for any free time in between due to the long PRDS of rest he needed. You're nearly at the first milestone. Igor said, looking over Izuku, just a bit more training, and you'll be able to easily beat up those third-rate thugs. Now let's get started on W8. Izuku yelled, see, can I rest up? For just a little bit, he asked, a tear streaming down from his eye. Igor then let out a low grunt. thinking about Izuku's request before letting out a sigh. Alright, I'll let you rest this one time, but I'll have to alter your schedule thank you. Izuku yelled, bolting out of Igor's home. Well, guess I should get to it, he said, pulling out a notebook and turning to a page that said Deku's schedule and crossing out the rest PRDS for the next week. Hard work is always at a cost, he said, smiling to himself as he imagined the young hero's growth. Izuku let out a small huff as he donned a thicker outfit for the changing weather. It was only a little colder so he didn't need much, but no matter what, the mask was a must, no matter how much heat it generated. After a bit of walking, Izuku entered the gaming district that he loved so much. Hero merchandise, the latest game consoles, access to only the best quality video games, and figures that the biggest super fan could only dream of. Sadly, he wasn't here for those things. Izuku let out a small huff as he remembered the quest he got from saving Toga. Before Izuku saved Toga, Izuku let out a small sigh as he finished defeating the last thug, holding in a whimper of pain as he looked to the quest he had received. Quest completed. Rewards: Igor's training methods. 3-sided die, quest line. Present quest line, 3-sided die. Go to the alley next to the horror game store in the gaming district. It was the first quest line that he had ever got. He was interested in it from the very beginning and wanted to do the quest the moment it was available, but Igor's training took up much more time than he thought. Luckily he needed to wait a while to begin anyway. With another sigh, Izuku continued, following the quest line's orders and entering the alley. Okay. So what now? He started before something, or someone bumped into him and fell to the ground. Oh sorry, he quickly said. Are you alright? He said before he looked down and saw a girl with tears streaming down her face. Oh. Izuku muttered, wondering what he was supposed to do in a situation like this. Food. The answer was food. The girl slowly ate the burger and fries that Izuku had bought. Almighty did always have amazing food, and only let out a few sniffles here and there as she ate. So. What's your name? Izuku asked, still feeling uncomfortable about the situation. Uraraka, she said simply, taking a bigger bite out of her fry. Okay, my name is Deku, he corrected. You can call me Deku. Doesn't that name mean ? She started. It's an alias, he interrupted, because people don't really tend to use their actual names where I hang out, and it would just be a bit more comfortable if you called me by that name, not that you have to or anything. I just figured that he started rambling, only to be cut off by Uraraka as she let out a laugh. It's fine Deku, she said, letting out a small chuckle. Izuku's face then turned flushed, a red glow coming off of his face before he cleared his throat. So, what made you so sad? He asked, trying to change the topic. Oh, it's just some boy trouble, she sighed. Some bstrd cheated on me with some random girl. She didn't even look all that cute, she muttered. Well. I think you look pretty cute, he said, giving an awkward smile. Sorry that was no. Uraraka interrupted. It was really nice. I think you're pretty handsome too. After a moment of silence they both erupted in a symphony of laughter, the awkwardness of the situation seemingly melting away and making way for a smooth, yet nerdy on Izuku's part, conversation. They talked for hours, mainly about heroes and stuff since they didn't really know one another, but it was still a good time. Soon, Izuku could feel the tug of fatigue making his eyelids heavy and a screen once again popped up in his face. Questline, leave without giving credentials to continue this quest line. Izuku thought it was a little odd, he didn't even have a phone number to give her, so that was likely going to happen regardless. After a few moments, he relented, feeling his head somehow gain a little weight before saying goodbye. Hey I got to go, he said, rubbing the back of his head, mulling over how to end the interaction. Uraraka said with a look of surprise. I've kept my friend waiting for a long time, so he trailed off, getting up from the chair. W8. Uraraka lounged, grabbing Izuku's arm as an almost pleading look formed in her eyes. Why don't we share our contact info? So we can keep in contact with one another. Sorry, Mine got kind of cast away in a fire, he sighed, a shiver going down his spine as he remembered the crazy man's ramblings. That wasn't a good time though. Maybe we'll see each other again if we're lucky, he said, a gleeful smile on his face. It was really fun talking to you. I never really had a friend I could do that with before, but now I do. I'll visit the district when I can. Later, he yelled as he ran out of the restaurant, only then realizing how long he had been gone, leaving Uraraka by herself. Oh, she muttered, watching as Izuku ran off. She was shocked. Surprised even that it didn't even take long for her to fall in love again, and the moment she thought she had something going, the one she loved left again, but, at least he would see her again soon. Right. Igor, please. Izuku cried, looking up at the towering villain. No. Igor said sternly, my training regimen is very strict. Leaves very little time for breaks because it provides only the best results. The longer the breaks, the longer you must train. No breaks for a month, he commanded, tears of pain streaming from Izuku's cheeks. Chapter End. Chapter 7. 1 month later. STG, 5-6 def, 1 greater than 63 con, 9-5 agi, 8 greater than 26 int, 3 greater than 19, scope, stronger than he was when he received All Might's quirk, by an average margin. Congratulations. Igor said, you have completed the first part of my training. You should feel very proud of yourself, Deku. Not many have the ability to do this, especially from your very weak starting point. Izuku remained on the floor despite Igor's praise and continued to gasp for air. Igor had been serious about the no resting, though what Izuku hadn't realized was sleep had also been counted as rest in Igor's eyes. Meaning, he could only rest when Igor knocked him out. For those precious few moments before he was forced awake by a bucket of water. Just as Igor was about to help Izuku up, his phone rang. Hold, he said, pulling out his phone before answering begrudged. What is it? I am busy, he groaned before his expression became serious. He then changed to Russian, thinking it would leave Izuku in the dark, but he had been practicing when he could. What do you want, you spinless bstrd? He seethed, trying to hide the anger in his voice. You know my number is reserved for those who don't stab others in the back. I do not care for your petty fights. If you have a problem with those sheets you call lackeys, then handle it yourself. TCH, fine. I'll head out, but don't expect anything less than a warning sign. He then let out a sigh, pressing his finger to his nose bridge before turning to Izuku. Ah. I'm sorry, Deku, I am going to be away for a little while. The next step will have to be postponed for a little while. Izuku then took another breath. It's fine, he said. I wanted to rest a little anyway. Yes, rest is important, Igor said, though you must still keep training. Keep your body in shape for when I return so we can get to the next step as soon as possible, he commanded, Izuku giving a nod before he left for the door. I'll leave an extra key for you. You can get the medical supplies from my apartment while I am gone, he finished before finally leaving. As soon as the door closed, Izuku let out a sigh, letting himself fall to the ground again as he tried to regain a little more energy. Though, as he felt the cold floor, the window once again appeared in his visual. Quest line, 3-sided die. Clean yourself up and go to the gaming district. Izuku let out a tired sigh before he reached out and grabbed what remained of an energy drink Igor gave him. At least I'll be able to see Uraraka again, he sighed, feeling his body cry out in pain as he got up. Quest line, 3-sided die. Go to the Gamers Haven arcade. Oh, does she like playing video games too? He muttered to himself, a smile coming to his face as he rushed over to the building. The moment he stepped in, he was met with the familiar smell of roses. A staple of the Gamers Haven arcade due to the fact the owner had a strict policy about cleanliness. She even kicked out an entire party of people because they smelled a little off. Izuku then took another breath of the rose-scented arcade before looking around for the once heartbroken girl when the window appeared again. Quest line, 3-sided die. Play Buster Heroes on 2-player, next vacant seat. Oh, that's just over the dash, he began before a voice rang out, cutting through the sounds of arcade games. Hop off the sticks USCK, the voice yelled, definitely angry at their teammates' lack of skill. Izuku then turned his attention to the crowd of people that surrounded the Buster Heroes game he was supposed to play. Hey. We still won, right? The guy retorted. We beat that boss super easily. You died not even 5 seconds into the fight. The girl retorted, the attack was even lined in red. How do you suck that badly? The two then diverged into an even larger argument before the worst of the two stormed off, muttering to themselves about how his sucky game's skill weren't that bad. Who's gonna take that sorry BSTRD's place? The girl asked, most of the crowd looking away with fear and surprise at the outburst. She then clicked her tongue and turned back to the arcade game, grumbling about the lack of backbone others had. Izuku then let out a small sigh. He was used to dealing with hot-headed people, so it wouldn't be too much of a problem. He then took a breath and walked over, pushing through the crowd with excuse and pardon me before taking the seat next to the hot-headed girl. She didn't notice him at first, giving him time to look at her. She had on a white fur coat that she used to cover her head, a black mask with a cute bunny character eating a carrot, black short shorts that exposed her almost caramel skin, and pink slides. She was basically the spitting image of a person would avoid an arcade, but Gamers Haven did have a way of drawing out odd people. Izuku then looked at the girl's screen, noticing that she was struggling against the boss despite her skill. Without a second thought, Izuku fished around in his pocket, pulling out a 100 yen coin before shoving it into the machine, bringing the game back to life with a loud jingle. He then quickly selected his favorite character to play. Not All Might, surprisingly, but the vigilante shadow diver. Izuku let out a sigh as he landed the last blow on the final boss, Shadow Diver rising from the villain's shadow and dealing a critical blow to end it all before the ending screen displayed over both arcade games. A loud cheer then erupted from the crowd that surrounded them. Finally, the girl said, pumping her fist as a look of pride washed over her before she looked at her partner, "You're pretty good for a kid." "Oh, thank you," Izuku said, "I play this game a bit, so I know most of the combos for Shadow Diver. Still, you're pretty amazing," she complimented. "How about I treat you to something, for helping out with this win," she said, the crowd erupting in oohs and ahs before she shot them all a glare. "Sure, I did work up a bit of an appetite." Izuku chuckled, causing a blush to form under the girl's mask before she quickly shook it off. Uraraka let out a small sigh as she sat on a bench, nibbling at a small warm hero-themed steamed bun as she once again realized that the boy she saw a month ago wasn't coming again. It was a shame really, she had imagined a life together with the boy, but those daydreams quickly fell apart when he didn't come the next day. And the day after that. And the one after that as well. Well, that's another failed day, she sighed, getting up and dusting off her warm clothes as she begun heading home. Just as she begun heading back though, she was able to hear the familiar boy's voice. Though it was distant, it was definitely his. Without another moment of thought she left behind the steamed bun and headed to the sound of Izuku's voice, allowing it to fall to the ground as she relied on her ears. Soon, she reached the sound, a wide smile on her face as she rounded the corner of a game store to the familiar restaurant that she met Deku. Only to have her smile quickly fade, and her heart break into pieces. Izuku was sitting across from a girl. One who, despite the mask, still looked appealing. More appealing than her at that moment. Her mind dug up a recent memory, the moment before she had met Izuku. Her boyfriend doing the same thing with some random girl from their high school. Kissing, laughing, and basically crawling over each other. It made her angry, filling her up with a rage that made her want to storm the building and give Deku a piece of her mind, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. She was too ridden in the throes of this familiar pain that all she could do was watch and let the tears roll over her cold cheeks. 1 week later Izuku let out a sigh as he dialed Igor's number into his new phone. He had been finally able to buy a phone, though it was from a pretty sketchy guy. It seemed to work just fine. "Now, let's see how Igor's doing," he muttered to himself as he pressed the call button, the device ringing for a few moments before the line connected. "Carrot, who is this? How do you have this number?" His voice came over in Russian, deep, gravely and angry. It was definitely Igor. "Igor, it's Deku," he said, letting out a small chuckle. Oh, Deku. It's been so long. How have you been? Igor asked, his tone changing anger to a pleasantly surprised one. I'm sure you're keeping up with your training, right? Yes, Igor, I have. Izuku sighed, those weights you left behind are pretty heavy, I get why you gave them to me. Yes, those weights were a gift from my mother. Very reliable but not very useful for me now. Think of them as gift. He said, a slight reminiscences in his voice, but now that I think about it, your muscles still won't be in the right condition for when I get back if you did such basic training methods. Ha! Izuku muttered. Actually. I know perfect thing. You know that I soar of a beach. Chapter End. Deku, Reborn gamer. Toga let out a long sigh as she walked down the dark neon-lit street. She had just run across a dry spell of activity, though it was mostly her fault since her last spree was a little more widespread than her prior ones. Now she had to lay low to stay off the hero's radar, much easier than it sounds since the city was much more closer to a SHT show than ever before. Just as she headed for the end of the road, she saw the famous Trashcan Beach. A surprisingly large staple of her life. Her dad drove past this spot many times, taking her to and from the doctors like it was life or death before he looked at it one day and forgot what an orphanage looked like. She then took a breath, the rancid air of trash filling her lungs as she neared the railing of the beach, remembering the piles and piles of trash that had littered the ground. Only to see a strangely large space where she could have sworn trash was pilled to the wall and over. No, even more than that, trash had been removed from the wall to nearly half the beach. It was surprising to see, mainly because no one gave a SHT about it before. It made no sense. Just then, she heard the sound of a dumpster rolling past. Next one's here. One of the men yelled before the sound of huffing came from the stairs that lead down. Coming. A familiar voice said, rising from behind was the very same boy that saved her that day. Deku. She said, surprised to see the shirtless boy. Oh. Toga. He said, I didn't expect to see you here. Yeah, I was just taking a walk, she said. She hadn't noticed before, but Deku was much more well-built than she thought. It even brought a blush to her face. Well, I'm just doing a little cleaning. He huffed, throwing the thrash he was holding into the garbage truck. It's a part of the training Igor gave me. He said this would be a good way to see my progress. Igor seems like a pain, Toga sighed. You plenty strong already, she said as she felt his body, focusing on the beating of his heart. Why do you have to do such meaningless SHT, she asked. For a moment a blush came to Izuku's face before he, fruitlessly, tried to shake it off. It's not meaningless. He retorted, a hero must do more than just defeat villains. They have to take care of the community as well, and help those in need. His words were like a band-aid on a stab wound, absolutely useless. She could care less about the morals of heroes, or whatever they believed. She mainly cared about how he would taste. How sweet it would be, and the endearing smell it would have. Toga. Izuku asked, waving a hand in front of her face. Can I watch? She asked, keeping her smile. I would love to help, but I'm not that strong of a girl, she said, making herself seem weak with an almost pouty expression. Sure. And you don't have to worry about helping out, I was going to do this by myself anyway. He smiled. Toga then let out a small chuckle before she sat on the stone railing, crossing her legs as she looked back at Izuku. Well then, you'd better get to work if you want this beach cleaned quickly, she said, an almost sultry look on her face that made Izuku's already blushing 110x more red. Uraraka let out a quiet sob, shivering under her blankets as the memories of her failed attempts at love play over and over again in her head. It hurt. It made her want to sleep forever and never have to deal with love ever again, but she couldn't help herself. It's so stupid, she seethed, why can't I just love someone who loves me? It doesn't make any sense, she yelled, angry at the world. Just then, she heard a light knocking at the door before hearing it open. Achiko. Her mother said, concern in her voice, "What's wrong, sweetie? Why can't I be loved?" she asked, her voice soaked with tears and sorrow as her mother got closer. "Oh sweetie, you are loved," her mother soothed, "me, your father, your friends, we all love you." "That's not what I mean." Achiko yelled, "I want a boyfriend who loves me and won't leave me for someone else," she sobbed, crying even harder into her blankets. Her mother then let out a sigh, contemplating for a moment before letting out a sigh. "Sweetie, do you want to know the secret to men?" she asked, grabbing her crying daughter's attention as she peeked through her makeshift shield. "You have to make them want you." "Make them want me?" Achiko asked. "Yes sweetie," her mother sighed, "this is a little trick that my mother taught. Wear makeup and look appealing, give them just enough for them to be interested but not too much, and be sure to make your intentions clear. Outright say what you want, don't beat around the bush or play hard to get. Men are stupid when it comes to love, but they're still the best thing a woman can have." She smiled before pulling the blanket off of Achiko. "So, who's the boy that's got you so sad?" With another huff Izuku lobbed couch in the back of a charity truck, huffing as the workers tied it down with straps. "Hey, why don't you rest for a second?" one of the men said, passing him a bottle of water. "And no. I can go a little longer," Izuku said, trying to stand back up before the guy put a hand on his shoulder. "Nope, everyone here is getting tired from watching you work yourself dead. Take some time to rejuvenate before going at it again, young man." Izuku then let out a sigh before taking the man's advice, gingerly taking the bottle of water before slowly drinking it. The man then nodded to a group that was standing closer to the trash piles on the ground, a man with a dog quirk, and another with what looked like a strength quirk. After receiving the signal, they turned to the pile of trash, the man with the strength quirk riffling through as they listened to the other with a dog quirk. After a few moments the man with the strength quirk pulled out a body. It was mangled and let out a smell so bad the man with the dog quirk covered his nose. Another group then came down, taking the body before they continued, removing more and more evidence. Soon, they were done and gave the signal to the man to signify they were done. They had the process down to a T, simple, quiet, and quick movements that not very many could easily copy. It's what put them at the top of the list for many villains in need of cleanup. Even with this job, they had deployed their best tactics but Izuku already knew. It was a simple slip-up, one that could have been easily avoided, but it took only a second for him to realize a misplaced sticker. One on the dash of the truck when he was asked to grab something, likely for the same reason they did it now. He was curious and pulled it off, revealing the name, Cautious Cleaners, for the heroic LY impaired. A name that he had known from a villain documentary linked to many cases of mysteriously disappearing people. He was scared at first, worried about what they could be doing behind his back, but he was already too deep. Chapter end.